You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hi, welcome to the Queens Podcast. This is Hillary, Megan, Kristen, and Zoe from Sisters Not Saints, the podcast where we offer real-life advice from the sisters you've always wanted. And when it comes to listening to Queens Podcast, what's our advice, guys?
I love it. I think it's great, but maybe throw some headphones on the kids in the back seat. Y'all, let's just cut to the chase. It's vulgar and explicit.
But tune in for sure, because these queens have stories to tell.
Once you listen to Katie and Nathan discuss badass women from history, tune into our podcast, Sisters Not Saints, to hear from some badass women of the present. That's us.
Now go forth and listen to Queens Podcast.
Hey guys, how many problems do you think we could have helped some of those queens with if they'd known about Sisters Not Saints?
Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about badass women in history. Hi, Nathan.
Oh my gosh, you guys.
Y'all, we are so going to talk about Matilda some more.
Matilda.
Oh my goodness. So, Nathan, remind us, where did we leave off in episode 1?
So, Matilda is born to Henry I of England. So that's the son of William the Conqueror, Le Conqueror. When she's a really young kid, she's engaged to the Holy Roman Emperor, shipped off to live in Germany at the age of like 8 or 9.
Can you imagine?
Scared, very scared.
Scared! Can you imagine?
So there she becomes the disputed Holy Roman Empress and even rules part of Italy as a regent for a few years. But then, not one tragedy, the tragedy. The white ship disaster kills her brother, which, if you're a part of a Patreon, we did an episode on that lately.
Yes.
And then her husband dies. So,
oh my gosh!
Left Maddie, yeah, I know, tragedy after tragedy, it's just terrible, and she's left traveling back to her father's lands in Normandy.
Which, I mean, oh my gosh, she was in Germany with her husband for like 15 years. So now the year is 1125, she's the Dowager Empress, and she is 23 years old. This girl has lived so much life by the time she was 23. What had you done by the time you were 23, Nathan?
Boned a lot of boys. Moving back. So she's moving back in with her parents, but she did take some items to remind her of her time as Empress.
Mm-hmm.
So she took 2 of her husband's crowns.
You gotta have 2 crowns.
Just a whole shitload of jewels.
Completely relatable.
2 crowns, shitload of jewels, and mummified hand of St. James. I mean, how can you forget that?
Yeah, if you guys remember from episode 1, the church that she married her first husband in, like, their claim to fame, because back then it was huge to have relics from the saints. So her and her husband were married in a church that had the mummified hand of the apostle St. James. And so I don't really know if, like, the church gave it to her or if she, like, stuffed it in her purse and walked out. Like, I don't know how she came into possession of this relic. Also, do you ever, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious, like, if you are Catholic and relics, like, mean things to you, I don't mean to be rude, but, like, do they have any proof that this was actually the hand of someone from the Bible, or was it just...
They just took a DNA test, found out that hand is 100% St. James.
Okay. You know, ye old DNA test from the 12th century. Okay, sure. Checks out. I believe it. Anyway.
So, Matilda knew that if her father never had any more legitimate sons, there was a chance that she'd be named heir of England and Normandy. And, okay, y'all, Matilda thought very highly of herself. I mean, she had been Empress, like, since she was a baby.
Yeah. And so, yeah, she was like, of course I'm going to be heir. Who else? Yeah. I'm the only heir in the heir. Like, who else is going to be the heir? Of course it's me. Because she had been trained from such a young age.
Yeah, and this was a time where, like, this is when in England they really started to differentiate between legitimate heirs and illegitimate heirs.
Yeah.
Like, so they were really starting to weed that out. So this was whenever the church was kind of taking over everything, being like, you have to be a legitimate heir, and it was, she was the only one left. So it's like, what you gonna do?
Again, this was so long as her father didn't have any more legitimate sons. Speaking of which, her dad was really trying to make some legitimate sons. 2 years before...
Yeah, he's just boning every
He loved, if you remember, he loved making babies. It was his specialty. It was his passion. But 2 years before Matilda headed home, Henry remarried. He remarried this woman named Adeliza of Louvain. She was from Louvain, which I'm probably saying all kinds of wrong, is in modern day Belgium. And she was only 1 year older than Matilda.
Ew.
But that means she was already 20 when she married the king, which compared to 9 is pretty nice.
Yeah, I guess so, but I don't know. If I was a dad dating someone my daughter's age, that might be a little bit weird.
A little bit weird.
But stepmom and King Henry never spent a night apart, basically, because making them babies.
Babies on babies on babies on babies.
But them babies never came.
Babies on babies.
Remember,
on babies
Henry
on babies.
the First had fathered at least 24 children that we know of.
Of
course, everyone blamed Adeliza.
Matilda arrives at one of her dad's palaces in Normandy, and she's reunited with her father. Remember, she hasn't seen her father since she was like 8 fucking years old. And I just wish I could find anything about their reunion. Was it emotional? Was it happy? Like, was it formal? Like, we just don't know.
No.
And we'll talk more about it later, but these two people clashed heads. So maybe it wouldn't have been on the sentimental side, I don't know.
Yeah. But one thing we do know about her arrival into her dad's court is that she didn't really fit in.
Yeah.
She has been at the bougiest court in Europe, if not the world, for the last 15 years. She was raised to be a very prim and proper empress, and her dad's courts were not like that. At dinner, people get drunk and make dirty jokes, and it's quite possible that Matilda is pretty shocked. I mean, how dare you talk to me, an empress like that? I mean, that's pretty much how she was. She was very pompous, if you will.
Yes. People complained about her being, very much always on her high horse, but, that's how she was raised. Most of the nobles in Normandy and England thought she was a snob. Who is this chick to come in here? And she thinks she's better than us. She can't take a joke. She's all prim and proper. But remember from episode 1, she went to Empress school with Bishop Bruno Mars, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She did kind of think she was better than everyone because it had been put into her brain. This is what an empress acts like.
Yeah, and also, though, she's grieving. I mean, she's depressed. I think she really loved her husband, who literally just passed away. She's been speaking German for the last 15 years, and then she rolls up into this court, and this court is speaking French and English, maybe a little bit of a hybrid of both, but she's having some struggles communicating.
Yeah, my heart really goes out to her. 1, did she think she was better than everybody else? Yes, probably. And 2, she's sad. However, on a happy note, she really got along with her stepmom. I mean, they were the same age. Adeliza was from Belgium, which at the time would have been pretty much the exact same culture as where she had been for the last 15 years. By all accounts, her stepmom, Adeliza, seemed like she was really, really sweet. And she was a peacemaker. And I have a little bit of a girl crush on Adeliza, if I'm being honest.
So Matilda chilled at her dad's royal court in Normandy for about a year, and Henry was basically just waiting to see if his new wife would get pregnant, because if she didn't, this all was going to be a huge pain in the ass.
Spoiler alert! So Henry was looking at his options for other heirs. He wasn't sick, he was in good health, but he was in his mid-50s, and it was the 12th century, so it was we need to have something in plan.
Yeah, so let's go over the options of who he would have considered at this point. So,
yes.
Behind curtain number 1?
What's behind door number 1, Nathan?
Robert of Gloucester. So, Robert was his eldest illegitimate son and probably his favorite child.
Yeah.
He was the most like Henry and a successful soldier and had been working in the English government for years and years now. But he was illegitimate.
So the deal with that is that, if you remember, William the Conqueror's parents weren't married, and from our Emma of Normandy episode as well, her parents didn't get married until they had already had several kids. In the older traditions, it kind of wasn't a big deal if you were quote unquote illegitimate, but it was in England. So the people thought oh, we'll never accept him. He's illegitimate.
So, who's behind curtain number 2?
Curtain number 2! A dude named William Clito.
So, this one is a long story that we don't really have time to get into.
Right.
But what you need to know is that Henry had an older brother named Robert Curthose, who Henry kept in jail for 50 years or something.
It's a wild story.
Robert had one legitimate son named William Clito.
What's the issue here? Why can't we have William Clito as the heir?
William Clito had been in an open rebellion against his uncle for years, so that would have just been this whole thing.
Y'all are fighting. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so door number 3. Who is heir possible number 3?
So we have his nephew, Stephen Blois, and we mentioned him quite a few times in the last episode.
Yeah.
Most notably that he didn't die in the White Ship disaster because he had the shits.
He was the party pooper.
Yeah, the party pooper, literally. And Stephen had been raised at court, working on his inner circle of at court for years. So everyone knew him. He understood English traditions. He was also married to another Matilda, and that's Matilda of Boulogne. Yeah,
I think it's Boulogne. I don't.
Boulogne?
She's not going to be a huge part in this episode, but in part 3, she's going to be a big part. So I think it's Boulogne, but we'll figure it out by the next episode. Fun fact. Stephen was Empress Matilda's first cousin on her dad's side, whereas Matilda of Boulogne was her first cousin on her mom's side. So that meant that Stephen's Matilda was also of Anglo-Saxon descent, also a descendant of Alfred the Great, which was a huge deal to a lot of people at the time. And she was also a rich heiress in her own right. So by marriage, Stephen also had the upper leg because he made a really great marriage. Just one little side note, something I saw on TikTok today that made me think of this, where it's her cousin is married to her other cousin. So she's got first cousins on the both sides. I saw a TikTok today that was what's something that is trashy if you're poor, but classy if you're rich? And someone said marrying your cousins. And then shot to Queen Elizabeth and her husband.
I mean, they're not wrong.
Point to the lie. Anyway.
So, finally, we have behind door number 4, we have our girl, Empress Matilda. So,
Matilda!
she's the only legitimate child. She's already had ruling experience, but the people are not familiar with her. So she doesn't know them. They don't know her. Mm-hmm. She's not raised in England or Normandy, so she doesn't know any of the customs. Probably didn't speak much English. Probably spoke French, because most people did, but she didn't act like she was Norman. So
she just wasn't, and we'll get to this more, but she just wasn't set up for success to be a ruler of England and Normandy. And of course, there's the issue that she had a vagina.
Oh no, she can't think. There's too much blood going to her uterus.
Like, her uterus is just traveling around. Like, who knows where it's gonna land? There wasn't a precedent in England for a female ruler. There had been female rulers in, like, Italy and Spain, but never in Normandy or England. There was one woman that I would love to dive into one day. I don't know if she would be worthy of have enough content for a whole episode on her own, or if she'd be Patreon, but she was named Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians. And that had been a couple of 100 years prior, but she ruled as a regent for her husband. So I don't know if it really was, like, enough to set a precedent in their culture. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But at least one of the other options, her half-brother Robert, kind of just took his hat out of the ring anyway.
Yeah.
He was a really powerful earl in his own right, and he was like, you know what? That's enough for me. He was like, I actually don't even want to be the king, even just a little, which... that's refreshing, because we never see that. But he recognized that his sister would possibly be named heir and would need some help since she was a little less popular. So the two of them did start to have a friendly relationship, which is really nice, because we never really see that, especially from someone who's competing or could be competition for the crown.
Yes. And also I feel like a lot of times in history, you don't see people getting along with their quote unquote illegitimate. I hate calling people illegitimate. You're not an illegitimate person just because your parents weren't married. But in history, you don't see a lot of people getting along with their quote unquote illegitimate siblings. And so I kind of love that the two of them, like, formed a close relationship. And also, we'll talk about this in the next episode as well. Their relationship together, to bring it back to Game of Thrones, kind of reminds me of him trying to be like her hand, like the hand of the Empress. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And she was gonna need a friend, because, and that's Texan for friend.
Fran.
Because on Christmas Day in 1126, Henry made an important announcement. So,
ooh, tell me more.
He's chosen an heir. And it's Matilda. Pew, 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 pew. So Henry has all the magnates and all the important lords and whatnot come to Westminster in England. And Matilda is dressed to the fucking nines.
Nathan, what is she dripping in?
Dripping in jewels eleganza.
Of course she is. She is looking like a queen. No, she is looking like an empress.
Love this for her.
Yes. And then one by one, all these lords who said she was too hoity-toity, she thought too highly of herself, they have to come in front of her and they have to swear an oath to her. Like, when your father dies, we will respect you as our queen if he doesn't have another son with his new wife. Big asterisk there. But still, it would have been a nice moment for her, of her being like, yeah, bitch. Mm-hmm.
So if you're watching House of the Dragon, that scene in the first episode where Rhaenyra is named heir, it's very, very obvious that George R.R. Martin got inspiration for that scene from our girl Matilda.
Yes. I mean, that's pretty much verbatim what happened, right? Mm-hmm. In real life, there were people that had to be coaxed, just like in that episode of House of the Dragon. And then there were people that were fighting over who would say their vow first. And the one that got to say it first was her uncle, the King of Scotland, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. having a king being like, I'm the first one that's going to swear an oath to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And an important note, though, about the oath that everyone swore to our girl, it was an oath to support her and her heirs, which is a little ambiguous to me. Like, they could be saying that if she had a son and if he's old enough by the time Henry dies, they could be swearing to support that guy. Like, maybe they could pass her up for a young boy, which is super annoying. But regardless, Matilda sees this as a win. You know, she's saying, you're bowing to me. I am the Empress. Suck these titties.
Suck it, bitch. Absolutely. But you know what? Henry was not an idiot. He knew that he was living in the 12th century, a time that was hugely sexist. History is a bag of dicks, as many important historians have said.
Us.
And other imaginary historians. So he knew to keep the nobles on his side, to keep the nobles on Matilda's side.
Yes.
She needed heirs. She needed babies, she needed sons, and she needed them soon.
Okay, remember in the last episode when we were talking about Matilda's brother William that died in the White Ship disaster?
Yeah.
So he's been married to a young girl that we think was like 10. So, yeah. From the Angevin family. This family ruled some land in France, and this marriage with William and the little girl, also named Matilda.
Because, of course.
Matilda, this marriage had helped to keep the peace between Normandy, Anjou, and some other French disputes that we just really don't have time for.
It was complicated. But now, William is gone. Henry was stressing. He was like, okay, I still want to keep an alliance with that family. I still want to keep them happy. Well, you know what? The Angevins, they have a boy in their family named Geoffrey that is single because he is 14 years old.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Matilda's 25.
That would be the most awkward thing ever.
And so Henry's like, yeah, Geoffrey, your son Geoffrey, my daughter Matilda, they're both single. Let's get them married. I don't care that she's 25. He's 14. I hate it here. Guess who else hated this arrangement as well?
Matilda.
Oh my God. Ding, ding,
yeah.
ding.
Hey,
yes.
You're about to marry baby. Yeah, congratulations.
Oh my
no.
God.
So when Henry was like, okay, I need you to marry Geoffrey of Anjou, Matilda was like, excuse me, what?
Excuse me, what?
She was expecting like some king or powerful
she
duke.
Comprehend. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So someone who was like, she was thinking they would be an adult who had already come into lands and titles. And she was the granddaughter of William the Conqueror, descendant of Alfred the Great. So Matilda had been married to the most powerful man, if not just in Europe, but the world. So she was a dowager empress. She ruled in her husband's name. So she had a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Man.
Do you remember in the last episode we talked about for like 2 whole years, she basically ruled northern Italy in her own goddamn right? Yeah. And now you want me to marry a 14-year-old?
No, thanks. So he's 14 years old, Geoffrey, and he was the heir of a count, not even heir to a kingdom or dukedom or anything like that. He was going to be the Count of Anjou, but that's it. Like,
and one day,
maybe. Yeah.
He's not a current duke. He's not a current count. He's oh my God. She was so fucking, the flames on the side of her face. She was so fucking pissed off. Like, are you kidding me?
Right. But annoyingly, Matilda does not have a choice. We all know this. So she was sent off to France for the wedding. And this time, unlike the first time, she had her own ladies in waiting that went with her. Her brother Robert went with her. So at least this time, she's not alone.
But in my opinion, I think sending her to France was a mistake. I know it's customary at this time to send the wife to the husband's lands. But honestly, I mean, if they are eventually supposed to rule England together, Matilda needed to know her people, and she didn't. She wasn't raised in England. She was raised in a foreign land. So sending her to another foreign land after her marriage, I feel like was short-sighted. She was not acclimated to the lands. The people in England were not acclimated to her. I just think it was a mistake to send her away to marry a 14-year-old barf. Barf. Barf.
So in June 1127, the two were married. So by this point, Matilda was 26 and Geoffrey was still 14. So Henry knighted Geoffrey, making him an English lord. And as a wedding present, Geoffrey's dad just gave them Anjou. Like, here you go. You can be a count now. I'm just going to go do some other stuff. Okay? Okay, bye.
Bye. Matilda was less than impressed with her new title as Countess of Anjou.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you blame her?
Mm-mm.
She had literally just been an empress, the Holy Roman Empress. And so for the rest of her life, she does not style herself Countess of Anjou. Can you blame her?
No, I would never.
She's always the Empress. But regardless if she liked it or not, she is now married to a teenager, and she is indeed Countess of Anjou.
So let's get down to business to meet her husband,
Jeff. Jeff.
Despite his age, he was really well educated, and much like Matilda, he thought very highly of himself. Super cocky, very into himself, into his appearance. Borderline narcissistic.
Oh, you know what? So was Matilda. We'll talk about it in depth more. But like, by the time that he was 14, he already had the nickname Geoffrey Le Bel, which meant Jeff the Beautiful, basically. If historical records can be trusted, this dude was a stone cold hottie. I don't like thinking about 14-year-olds being a stone cold hottie. But supposedly for his entire life, everyone was just like, you are the prettiest person I've ever seen in my life. So
I mean, I'm looking at a picture of him, and I mean, it's just stunning.
I would like to note that back then they didn't understand the concept of painting accuracy of people. So you can't really judge.
It looks like it's out of like a comic book. Like it's real unfortunate, but hey, we love them for it.
We don't know. But if records can be believed, he was a fucking hottie.
Sorry, I still get gross because I'm like 14-year-old.
He's 14 and she's 26.
Okay, so he also liked to dress really fancy, loved the finer things in life. In fact, he liked to wear this flower in his hat or hip lapel. The Latin name for the flower that he wore was the Plantagenista.
Mm-hmm.
So he got the nickname Plantagenet. Maybe you've heard of this before.
I don't know. It kind of sounds familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
So from the get-go, this marriage was not happy.
Nobody was happy.
And in case you're wondering, the age of consent for girls at the time was 12, barf, but it was 14 for boys, barf.
Also barf.
So, yes, Matilda would have been expected to sleep with them on their wedding night, which she probably hated this, but we really don't know.
I actually want to spend no time on this topic.
All right, moving on. So, yeah, Maddie and Jeff are not into each other at all, which really frustrating for King Henry because he wanted grandsons like yesterday.
He was like, make some babies. And she was like, I hate him. And also he's a child. But also, I think a huge part in the discontent in their relationship comes from Henry. Henry was not blameless in these marital disputes. Remember how Matilda was supposed to inherit both the titles of Queen of England and Duchess of Normandy?
Yes.
Well, part of their wedding, part of their dowry, the wedding agreement was that upon their marriage, they would inherit a bunch of these castles, a bunch of these lands in Normandy, and basically get to start like practice queening, like practice ruling.
Okay.
So the people in Normandy could get to know them because they don't fucking know these people. They're like, who the fuck is this German speaking bitch and this fancy little teenager? Who the fuck are these people? So they were like, the idea was like, okay, they'll get to know them. You're going to be the Duke and Duchess, da 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 da. But after the marriage, Henry did not hand over the lands. In fact, years later, he had still not handed over the lands. On top of that, Matilda and Geoffrey's personalities like clashed. They did not gel. They did not vibe. And they were fighting like 24/7.
Well, I'm sure part of that is like, why won't your dad give us the lands that he promised? And Matilda's like, you think I want to live here on your lands? No. I want to be in Normandy too, you spoiled brat.
Exactly. And so they were just fighting and fighting and fighting. And the entire time, Matilda is writing home, complaining to her dad, like, just like, this isn't working. My husband's a brat. Give us our lands. That might help. And Henry, the entire time, is just leaving them on red.
Ugh. Also, another thing that Henry did that did not help the marriage issues is he made it purposely unclear what Geoffrey's title would be after Matilda became queen.
Yeah.
Something we don't have time to go into is that Jeff's dad had married the Queen of Jerusalem. So he was king of Jerusalem and had more power than his wife and ruled for her. So both Matilda and Geoffrey were like, okay, what's his role supposed to be?
What? Yeah.
Is he going to be above me? Is he going to be a king consort?
Yeah.
So there's really no precedent. So they're waiting for Henry to tell them. But once again, Henry's leaving them on red.
What we have here is three very, very hard-headed people creating a very toxic home life environment. But most specifically, Maddie and Jeff, because they're the ones actually living together.
Yeah. So why do we think that Henry didn't want to give them their lands in Normandy he promised? I mean, we can go over this and over this. And as petty as it sounds, I think he didn't want Maddie and Jeff getting too big for their britches and then trying to declare themselves Duke and Duchess before they were ready. So it was really just started so much shit.
And when you look at it historically, it's like he really should have given them more power so they like understood how to rule the lands. But if you look at his family dynamic, I mean, go back and listen to our Matilda of Flanders episode where we talk about how the brothers just fought each other. Maybe Henry thought he was doing them a service by not giving them power and so therefore not setting them up for rebellion. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that he was kind of an intellectual type of leader. So I can see him doing something like that and being like, well, I don't want them to be in the same situation I was. So let's hold off on giving them the title so that they don't have some uprisings against them. So,
or he was just being a power hungry dick. One or the other.
That too. So he's just not setting her up for success because the people of England and Normandy didn't really know her.
Yeah.
And that applied previously and that applies here now too. So,
yeah. Well, we don't know exactly what all went down, but less than 2 years into the marriage, Matilda was like, y'all, I am fucking done. I am done with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
I am DONE done. Fuck this place. Fuck this dude. Fuck Anjou. I am out of here. And she left her husband and she went back to Normandy and she tried to get a divorce or an annulment or whatever. Yeah, this is wild. We've talked about some people that get annulments, but it's not usually like 2 years after.
Yeah.
Because of the people that we've heard of getting annulments, getting divorced, it's like years and years and years. I have to wonder how bad those first 2 years must have been.
Yeah, they must have been fighting like a lot.
Well, also something that we should think about, back then, once you were married as a woman, you were a subject to your husband, basically.
Yeah.
I have to assume that her being like, I'm an empress, you're a teenager, didn't help anything in their relationship.
Right. But so while we ponder this moment, let's take a quick break, top off our drinks, and we'll be right back.
Be right back. Nathan, you know what I love?
What's that?
I love podcasts.
Well, I hope so. And if you're out there listening and you're also a podcast lover, you might want to subscribe to Podcast the Newsletter.
Yes. Podcast the Newsletter is Lauren Purcell's weekly love letter to podcast and the people who make them. Each week, Lauren gives podcast recommendation and interviews someone in the audio space.
And she has good taste.
Mm-hmm.
She's personally recommended Hair Flip Queens podcast in the podcast the newsletter before.
Yes. And if you're a podcast maker, check out her newsletter, Podcast Marketing Magic, where she'll give you podcast marketing tips. And y'all, I promise it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, you can find these newsletters at tinkmedia.co. There you can also find a podcast promo database where you can search podcasts to collaborate with for promo swaps.
Find all of that at tinkmedia.co. Cheers, bitches. We're back. Nathan, have you topped off your drink?
Yes, I have.
Yes,
I am
darling.
lubed up and ready to go, darling.
We're talking about the great separation. Matilda and Jeff are separated. And Matilda stayed in Normandy for just shy of 2 years. I'm not really sure what's going on during this time, but it does seem like she spent a lot of time with her stepmom, Adeliza, who the entire time tried to convince her, like, you should go back to your husband. You should talk to your dad, get him to give y'all some kind of thing to make this better for y'all. But Maddie was too proud. She was too proud to go to her husband and let's make a negotiation. Too proud to go to her dad and be like, make my marriage happier. It's just, she was just too proud.
Yes. But in 1131, when Matilda was about 29, her dad called her to England. So he calls Matilda in front of his whole council and is like, hey, if I get everyone to swear fealty to you again, will you please, for the love of God, go back to your husband? And then Matilda's like, okay. And she just agrees.
So he called all his lords to Westminster again, and they all pledged loyalty to her again.
So she went back to Jeff and things got better, we think, by the sound of my voice.
We don't know exactly what went down, but maybe Jeff grew up a little bit. And maybe Matilda was a little bit pacified by a second time everyone agreeing to pledge loyalty to her.
Do you think we're going to see this in the Game of Thrones as well?
Maybe.
Right. So the next year they had their firstborn child, a boy named Henry. Because of course it's Henry.
Because no one is creative with names in history.
Absolutely no.
No.
So a little bit of a fast forward. But this is Eleanor of Aquitaine's future husband.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of his early life, he was known as Henry Empress. So let's call him that to keep him separate from all ye old Henrys.
All the other Henrys. It really won't come up in this episode, but for future. A lot of foreshadowing, a lot of setting up for the third episode.
Yeah. So y'all, obviously this is huge for any dynastic marriage. Having a boy was the main goal. Mm-hmm. But this was a sigh of relief for King Henry, because having a son was going to make it a lot easier for everyone to just accept Matilda at the time.
Yeah.
And it appears it made Jeff and Maddie's marriage a lot more harmonious at that time.
Yes. Also, with the birth of a grandson, King Henry finally gave them some castles in Normandy. It wasn't any power. He didn't actually give them power, but they had like, here, move into these lands so the people can start seeing you, which Matilda did as fast as she fucking could. I don't think she liked living in Anjou for a second. And this is where she gave birth to her second son named Geoffrey. Because again, we are not very creative with names.
No, we aren't. So, y'all, seriously though, side note, she nearly died in this birth.
Yes.
Like, can you imagine? I'm surprised so many people kept having sex and babies all throughout history, because it's a real possibility that you might die from this.
Absolutely. Like, she was so close to death that Henry and Adeliza, they sailed in from England thinking that they are going to like catch her on her deathbed. And while she was on what everybody thought was her deathbed, Henry and Matilda got in like a throw-out argument. Like,
oh my God.
Because she was like, if I die, I want to be married. I want to be buried in this courtyard of this convent that does this charitable work, da 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 da. And Henry was like, well, no, you're going to be married. You're going to be, why do I keep saying married? You're
married and buried are two very
different things. You're going to be buried in this plot where like, your brother's buried, your mom's buried. No, you're going to be
all
buried.
The royal family's buried.
And they got into this huge fight while she was on what everybody thought was her deathbed. And you know what? While I usually am like, I don't like being confrontational, maybe that fight like kept her brain going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe
kept
it
her
helped.
Adrenaline up and kept her heart moving. Maybe it helped her get through it. Yeah.
I personally would never start a fight with somebody that I thought was on their deathbed, but maybe it worked.
Yeah, because she ended up recovering. And Henry got to be present at the christening of his grandson. And it is said that for a while, they lived like a happy family. And then Henry at this point loved to spoil his grandsons.
Yeah. So I love that he got to be like he got to be a pawpaw for a minute. Like, I love that. However, it wasn't all happy reunion, because Jeff was like, and I don't blame Jeff for this. I think this makes sense. He was like, hey, since you're here, you're in Normandy, I wanted to talk about our role here. You gave us these castles. That was very nice. But like, why don't you start letting us, rule some shit? Like, I mean, we're going to run it one day. I feel like it's good for them to start to get to know us. So why don't you start giving us some power?
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Perfectly reasonable.
I don't think he was asking for too much here, but Henry did not share our opinion on this and went off. He was like, what the fuck, dude? Trying to take my lands before I even died? Fuck you. Fuck your wife. Fuck this. And the whole family ended up having this huge falling out.
This fucking family. They are drama, drama, drama. I swear, it's these three people with these massive egos. Do you agree that all three of these people just like have egos bigger than the room that they're even in?
No, I agree.
So the next year, there was an uprising in Normandy, and Jeff, with Matilda's support, sent troops from Anjou to support the uprising. So basically, they sent troops to fight against Matilda's dad. I can't.
Oh my God, I can't
the drama.
With this drama.
I can't. Though the only nice thing I can think worth mentioning is that, hey, at least Matilda and Jeff are getting along.
Yeah, right. Like, they're not in love. Like, I don't think they were ever in love. But I do think that after the birth of their kids, they were like, okay, we have common ground now. Like, we're both fighting for the lands that were promised to us.
Yes.
We need to start raising our kids. We need to start showing them how to run shit because they're going to be future rulers too.
Exactly. We need to be a united force for our children. So at least they have a thing they can get behind now. At least they're not fighting anymore.
But maybe it's just a bunch of wild and crazy kids that loved fighting. Who knows?
It's completely possible. Either way, this time they've gotten in so many arguments and made amends. This time they don't get to make amends. There was no like kiss and make up because on December 1st, 1135 in Normandy, while fighting the troops from Anjou, Henry I dies.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently from eating too much eels.
Wait, what?
The story goes that there were these eels that I think it's lampreys. I don't fucking know. I have never heard of this before. But he was just like, Henry was just gobbling them up. And the doctor was like, hey, we don't know, but like maybe those are bad for your health. And he's like, fuck you. I'm king. I eat what I want. And the doctor was like, all right, not trying to get killed. And then Henry died because history is horrifying. And so, Nathan, actually, let's take a quick discussion. What are the most horrifying things people have died from? In the Mary Queen of Scots episode, her first husband died from an ear infection.
Yeah, that's one.
And the Catherine de Medici, her husband died from a lance through the eye.
Okay, that's right. Which other ones do we have?
This guy died from eating too much fish.
We genuinely have no idea how Matilda reacted when she found out her dad died. Mm-mm. They had a complicated relationship, but still, it was her dad.
It was her dad.
If she did some kind of private mourning period, it's not well documented. Mm-mm. But what is documented is that Matilda, Jeff, and some of their soldiers moved on all the castles in Normandy that were supposed to be theirs anyway.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, these are finally ours.
Yeah.
We can has? Yes.
Yes, we are taking. I think Matilda was thinking that the court would come to her and crown her queen. I mean, why would she doubt it? All That's these true. People have sworn an oath to her, not once, but twice. So she's thinking, okay, they're going to come to me. They're going to bring the court to me, and I'm going to be crowned queen. Or she was thinking, I'm going to hop across the English Channel. But she got held up for two reasons. One, it was winter. The White Ship disaster that we talked about last time.
Yeah, in the winter.
Happened in the winter. So maybe she's not dying to jump across the English Channel in the winter. Secondly, she found out she was pregnant again.
Yeah, that could also be something that holds you up.
Yeah.
And nearly dying the last time that she was pregnant, she's probably a little shook. Just a
little shooketh. A little bit like, maybe I'll take it easy.
Yeah, so she might have been thinking, okay, let's write some letters. Let's gather the lords here in Normandy, and then we'll do a coronation in Westminster after the baby is born. Just lay low. This crown isn't going anywhere. We can just take it easy.
And a lot of people believe that she was sick because a lot of people in their first trimester, early second trimester of being pregnant are nauseous like 24/7.
Oh, absolutely.
Have horrible experiences. So maybe she really wanted to cross the channel, but like physically couldn't because she was fucking sick. And it's totally possible that she tried her damnedest to get over to England and just couldn't,
Meanwhile, Stephen Blois has entered the chat.
Oh, I wonder what he's up to.
Yeah, remember him? Matilda's first cousin? Stephen was now married to a very wealthy heiress named Matilda of Boulogne.
Yeah, we talked about her a little bit earlier, Matilda of Boulogne.
Sorry.
And Boulogne, where Stephen was hanging out, was a much quicker boat ride than Normandy. And And his wife Matilda was very, very well known in England.
And Stephen was also set up for success by his uncle since day one. I mean, people knew him, they liked him. Other nobles knew him, they liked him, they liked his wife. She's bringing lots of money with her, so things are getting a little hairy here. Stephen arrived in London on December 8th, only 1 week after Henry died, which, for the 12th century, fucking fast.
That is so fast!
Yeah, which makes me think that he had been planning this for some time.
Yes, for word to get to you and for you to travel that far in a week. Like, yeah, I think he had some sparrows.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So Stephen's brother was a powerful bishop in London too. And the two of them synced up and went to the other powerful holy men in London who they also would need on their side.
Yeah.
So Stephen is like, oh, the king wrote me on his deathbed and was like, hey, I only named my Empress Matilda my heir, just to keep the peace. Mistake, because boys rule, girls drool, and I want you to be king. And the clergy's like, can we see this letter?
And Stephen's like, no.
And then they're like, whatever, we believe you because you have a penis.
Because you have a penis, why would you lie? Okay, real talk, no historical proof survives that Henry made any such declaration on his deathbed. And in my opinion, and Nathan, if you disagree with me, you can let me know. But in my opinion, Henry was very concerned with his legacy.
Oh, yeah.
With what was going to happen next. Yes, him and Matilda had been butting heads for years, but I don't think he meant to leave anything up to chance. So I think if he had made a deathbed confession, a deathbed change of heart, there wouldn't have just been a mysterious letter sent to Stephen. It would have been
only Stephen
that then disappeared. It would have been, he would have called all of the chroniclers. He would have called like 15 people in. It would not have been. I think every person, because he languished for like 2 days, but that's 2 days that he could have do you get what I'm saying? I don't.
Yeah, he had 2 whole days to be like, yo, remember whenever I said that about Matilda? Just kidding. She's a bitch. I don't like her. I want Stephen to be the king.
But the fact that supposedly the only person that got this memo was Stephen, that's suspicious.
It's suspicious.
I think if that had actually gone down, there would have been so much documentation in it. But so that's Queen. That's my thought.
That's my thoughts. But it doesn't matter because it was convenient for all the men.
Yes.
They wanted to believe that Henry had named a man his heir because there had never been a woman ruler before.
Exactly.
And that scared them because bag of dicks.
History
is a bag of dicks.
Absolutely. And everyone is
Also, we mentioned for a hot second in the first episode that Matilda's mom was raised in a convent.
Yeah.
So, there was always this rumor that her mom had taken nun vows, a claim that her mom always denied. Well, some priests then came forward and were like, oh, we have proof that Matilda's mom was technically a nun, so her marriage was null and void. And Matilda is a bastard.
The audacity. Could you imagine if Henry was still alive, if any of these people had made a comment like that?
I know. The lion, the witch, and the audacity.
The lion, the witch, and the audacity. Honey, yes. He would have had all of their noses chopped off. He would have had them hung, drawn, and quartered. But because it was convenient for them, they were like, oh yeah, she's a bastard anyway, so MBD. Woo! Woo! The lion, the witch, and the audacity.
I like my men hung, drawn, and quartered, but then that just doesn't work.
The drawn and quartered. The hung works, but the rest of it, not so much.
Yeah, not so much. Good try, Nathan. So either way, on December 26th, literally just a few weeks after Henry's death, Stephen is crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey. And the people of London were stoked.
Yeah.
Remember, unlike Matilda, the people knew him, knew that he knew their customs, felt like, that they were part of him. So Matilda, on the other hand, was a stranger to these people. She married a foreigner. She was sent off when she was young. They didn't know her. They didn't trust her.
Whereas Stephen was raised there, his wife was known. They were known. People in London knew them and loved them.
Yeah, and then one by one, all of these lords that pledged their allegiance to Matilda just a couple of years ago came to Stephen and started pledging their oath to him.
Yeah.
All the while, Matilda was sitting back in Normandy just waiting for word from court of what the next step was. Remember, typically news travels slowly back then, and it was literally only like 2 or 3 weeks after her father's death.
And also, his coronation was December 26th. So there was the Christmas holiday in between that. Right. So Matilda's thinking oh, this is going to be delayed because of Christmas. Whenever a messenger finally arrives to Matilda, you have to imagine this poor messenger showing up just completely full of dread. And so Matilda's there sick from being pregnant. And so this messenger just rocks up oh my God, I can't believe I have to tell this pregnant woman this horrible news.
Right.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, cool. Someone with an update on what's going on, what's coming up with my coronation, what's going on with the transition of power. Let me know what's happening.
But instead, they tell her, hey, Stephen said your dad appointed him king and he's already been crowned and anointed. And, all those dudes that swore to you, yeah, they're on Stephen's side now. Super sorry. Okay, bye.
Which we have to imagine Matilda said, what the fuck?
And that's where we're going to leave this episode.
Yeah. We haven't figured out if this is going to be a 3-part or a 4-part, but either way, catch us in a couple of weeks with the rest of the story.
Yay, can't wait.
Cheers, bitches.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, if you want to hear something, just email us at queenshistorypodcast@gmail.com.
And follow us on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
We have a really great Facebook discussion group. We'd love to see you over there, too.
And if you're so inclined, we do have a Patreon account if you need more Queens content in your life.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, bitches.
Cheers, bitches.